Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 611 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today on your favorite podcast, I'll be speaking with Nancy, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 73. Nancy is now 75, and she's coming on the show to tell us her story. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Are you looking for a simple and easy way to help people with type 1 diabetes? Well, if you are, you're in luck. By going to the T1D Exchange and filling out their survey, you'll be helping people with type 1. Now, you have to be a U.S. resident who is either a type 1 or the caregiver of a type 1. But after that, go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Fill out the survey. Does not take long at all. It's easy to do from your sofa, your cell phone, your tablet. Very, very easy. And every time that someone completes the survey, not only does it help people with type 1 diabetes, but it helps the Juicebox Podcast. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Use the blood glucose meter that my daughter does. Contour Next One. Find out more at contournext.com/juicebox.
My name is Nancy, and I know the reason I contacted you was because I was diagnosed so late in life. I was 73 when I was diagnosed. So I'm Nancy, and I'm a diabetic.
Nancy, are you aging backwards? Because unfairly, I can see Nancy and she can't see me, but you're not over 73, right?
Oh, I'm almost 75.
Wow, good for you.
But thank you. And and that kind of works in on my behalf at this point in my life.
Do you feel younger, or are you just lucky and you look young?
Interesting question. I think I feel fairly young. Just for background, my parents are both still living, 101 and 102.
Wow.
So yeah. So I thought that's kind of interesting, and I'm the first one, like in my immediate family with diabetes. So they're generally healthy, no heart problems, no chronic illnesses.
Your brothers and sisters?
Doing the same. I mean, we all, excuse me.
You're fine.
We've all had cancer except my sister.
Okay.
So that was kind of an interesting, and there's a reason I brought that up, but that's kind of an interesting fact, which I never even considered. I never even thought about it. But I was diagnosed with melanoma about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it metastasized, and I had immunotherapy treatments, which I never had a day of tiredness or anything. I mean, I felt good the whole time, and even actually thought or wondered, is this just a farce? What's going on with me? But I've had side effects from the immunotherapy. So that's where I got the diabetes.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. All right, this will be fun. There's plenty to pick through here. So you have a mother and a father who are like 1,000 years old and they're still alive. And how many brothers and sisters?
I have a brother and a sister.
Okay, so there's 3 of you. Each of the 5 of you have had cancer.
Except my sister.
Except your sister.
Yes.
Different kinds of cancer?
Yes. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and metastatic melanoma.
Wow. Which one did your father have?
Prostate.
And he's doing well.
And he's okay. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know what to say and not say, but it's kind of like he says, there's a certain point when you wonder why you're still here. And that was probably about 4 or 5 years ago that he said that.
Tell me again how old he is.
102.
Wow, no kidding. Yeah, I guess I just turned 50 yesterday. And
happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And I was laying in bed at the end of my my 50th birthday, feeling a little sad about being 50. And I said to my wife, the strangest thing is that here in the dark with my eyes closed, I can't tell how old I am. Like I don't know. I said, I'll get up and look in a mirror and I won't look the way I remembered. Or, my son will ask me to throw with him and my shoulder won't handle it for more than like 20 minutes or so. And, that kind of stuff then, it gives you more of a perspective of where you're at. But you always think like, oh, I'm 50, I have so much time left. But I wonder what the difference is between time and really usable time, like any way you want to use it, time. And that's probably how your dad feels a little bit like, yeah, I'm here, but there's stuff I want to do and I can't do it anymore. That's crazy. Okay. So, all right.
Exactly. Can I
Please.
pivot off that for a second?
Yeah, I
Because
want you to.
when I was diagnosed with melanoma, and I'm sure everybody goes through this when you have a death threat, so to speak. I really did some soul searching and looked at my life, and I had done a lot of things. In fact, at the end of the treatment and everything, I had done a lot of my bucket list and a lot of things that I had wanted to do. And I started thinking, okay, now what? Now what? Well, the now what was diabetes, but irregardless of that, it totally changed the way I look at life. And in a way, I mean, I'm old. I'm old, in a way I'm old. I mean, a lot of things that I didn't do as a younger person, I don't know that I could, would, or should do them now. So yeah, I did a lot of reflecting on that and looking at it. And, you do at a certain point, you go, oh shoot, I can't go back to high school.
Right.
Or, whatever it might be. Yeah.
How, I'm going to get back to that later, but how old were you when you found out you had cancer?
I think I was 69.
Okay. And then
I think I was 1 month away from my 70th birthday. Yeah.
At 70 years old, do you just think, I beat it? Like nothing's going to happen? Like what the thing that happens next is how I die? Do you start having thoughts like that?
I never had those thoughts.
Not like that.
Actually, the crazy thing is I never even had a thought that I would have cancer. I mean, the same thing with diabetes. It never entered my mind.
Yeah. Well, how long did the treatment for the cancer take?
I had a supposedly preventative measure at the end of the at the end of the second year. So it didn't go anywhere after that, for a while. And then 5 months later, it metastasized.
Okay.
And so those 4 treatments really didn't help,
Right.
apparently, or maybe they did, who knows. But anyway, and then I didn't have a lot of treatments. I was trying to think that through. It's funny how I kind of forget things when they're behind me, but I know I had 4 treatments of the same immunotherapy that I had before mixed with another one. And then after that, I had the other one, I think once a month for the rest of that year. So I think the treatment was about 1 year.
Are you, and how do you think of yourself now in relationship to cancer?
I never saw it as a fight.
Okay.
I saw it as something that maybe I didn't know. I don't know if I did something to do with it along, getting it or not. I don't know that. But I'm not like the pink ribbon person that runs around and says, I don't know. It's just something that happened.
Yeah.
It's just something that happened. I dealt with it, and and my whole family is kind of that way. I mean, they never really talked about their cancer as much as I talked about my cancer.
Gotcha. Well, okay. So are you in remission now? Like, how do they categorize it?
I'm not sure if I am, but I think this next appointment or shortly he's going to let me go, because I still see my doctor, the oncologist, every 3 months.
Okay.
Now I only see the dermatologist every 6 months.
Gotcha.
I stopped seeing the surgeon a year and a half ago.
I see.
So I think, I don't know, he said if you get it again, the treatment will probably work again. And that's why they wanted to stop it as soon as they did. But yeah.
So when do you get diabetes in this whole mess? Is it during the cancer?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So it was afterwards. I mean, I've been reading some articles just recently about it, and a lot of people get it right during their treatment. But my treatment was pretty short, a year. And then I believe it was, because I got it in 2019 at the October. So it might have been 3 years after the melanoma. So maybe a year after the treatments stopped.
And then what was your first indication of the diabetes?
Oh, thank you, cancer, right? I was getting CT scans every 3 months.
Okay.
And so I went to get a CT scan, and my blood sugar, because I always have to take your blood sugar, which I didn't even remember it being taken before, but apparently they always take it. And she said, are you diabetic? And I go, no, I don't think so. And she said, well, your blood sugar is 298. And I just about dropped, because 15 years before, actually 14 years before, my son had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
At what age?
He was 35.
Okay.
And his was not as easy as mine. Mine was just kind of like, okay, it's 298. I go home, call my doctor. I have Hashimoto's. So I've been seeing an endocrinologist every 6 months anyway. So I go home, call her, tell her what's going on. She, suggests I go get a glucometer and start testing my blood sugar. And then I start watching videos, and I went back 2 days later, and my blood sugar was 202, I think. She said, I'm sorry, we can't do the test today. And I go, well, gosh, sunken in the seat, thinking, oh my gosh, do I really have diabetes? And then she said, would you like me to take it again? And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Take it again. I mean, it didn't even enter my mind that she could take it again. It might be different, but she took it again, and it was 198. And so they did the test.
They just didn't want to take it over 200?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus, that's ridiculous. Those meters can be off by as much as like 15%, some of them.
I know.
Hey, give me this real quick. Your son, late in life baby, oops baby, second marriage baby. Were you just waited till you were older to have kids? What was the thing there?
Yeah, I mean, we were young when we had kids. My daughter was, I'm 21 years older than her, and 24 years older than my son. So it was just, in those years in my life, you just do what the next thing is to do, and that was have kids. So you went to school, and then you found a guy, and then you're like, well, it's time to make a baby and find a place to live. Well, yeah. What? I went to school. I think the guy found me. And then I quit school so he could finish school. Yeah. Boys. So it took me a long time to go, get back to school. And did you go back eventually? I eventually got a degree in accounting when I was like 38. Wow. And then we got divorced, and then I got my master's in social work when I was 57. Wow. And worked for 10 years, and then just retired, a few years ago. Good for you. That's pretty cool. Okay. So your son has had type 1 diabetes for a while, but as an adult, so what do you really know about it before you know what? It? Exactly. That was shocking to me, because he was 35 at the time. And so he was an adult, and he happened to be living with me at the time.
Okay.
So just going through the experience with him was just horrible. And then, kind of watching him, I mean, he's amazing in a way, because he never even gave himself a shot when he was in the hospital, and he was there for 27 days, I think, 27 days. I mean, in retrospect, I say, how did you get away with that? He said, well, every time they'd come in and want to teach me, I'd let them teach me, but I would never do it. I go, okay, whatever.
Tell me a second, how many years ago was he diagnosed? 15?
15 years, yes.
And he was in the hospital for a month?
He was in the hospital for a month. I mean, he was dead almost.
Okay.
I think he was dead. He was on life support for about 3 days. He was on dialysis. He was on, what else do you have? He was on a breathing machine, a ventilator.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. He really almost died from it then.
Yes.
Is that how they caught it? Because he fell over?
No. I mean, it was like he went to a doctor. Fine. I mean, he didn't have insurance or anything. So he had told me for not very long, short while, like a couple days, he had stomach was bothering him, and it had been bothering him, and he was going to finally go to the doctor. So I go, okay, so he goes to the doctor. I think it was on a Thursday, and calls me, and I'm at work, and he says, Mom, the doctor just gave me some insulin, and I need to go to the hospital. And I'm thinking, what? This is weird. What's going on? So I said, I'll come and get you, and I'll drive you to the hospital. He said, I think I can make it. It's only, a couple blocks away. I go, no, just wait. So I was like 20 minutes away. I flew out of there, went over and picked him up, and, couldn't find him. I didn't know where he was, but anyway, I eventually found him, and we drove to the hospital, which was further than I thought. And as he was walking in the hospital door, and I was parking the car, I saw him, and he was just dragging. I mean, you've probably seen that before, just dragging their foot one after the other, and skinny. I mean, he was probably 175 and went down to 140, I think. Okay. But we didn't notice it. I remember telling him a few days before, gosh, you look so good. I mean, because he was really thin. He looked really, really good. Yeah. So then he went in the hospital, and I parked the car and went in with him. And then they took him back almost, pretty immediately. And I didn't know what to do. And he was 35, and he'd never been in the hospital before. So I kind of stood around for a while, and then thought, what, I can't go in with him at this point. And so I went home, and he never called me. And I was like, normally he would call me, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh well. My family is, no news is good news. So don't worry about it. He's probably fine. And then finally the next day he hadn't called me yet. And I was like, what? So I finally called around noon, and the nurse answered the phone, and she goes, I go, how's my son? And she goes, oh, he's very sick. Mm-hmm. She goes, he's very sick, but he's in good care. I go, well, should I come over there? He's a 35-year-old man. Why hadn't he called me? I didn't know. I was totally confused. Yeah. And she goes, no, you don't. No, just finish your work and do what you need to do. And then, he'll be fine. I was like, okay. But when we hung up, I was like, no, something, this is, So I grabbed everything and ran over there to the hospital, and I ran in there, and he was just laying there by himself alone, with this nurse that he told me she's so mean, she, whatever she does, and she's just, if I don't eat something, she grabs it away from me. And, he said, I'm so glad you're here. I go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm here too.
Yeah, that's insane. Oh my gosh. Do you know what his blood sugar was when they took him in?
He was 500 and something,
Wow.
545. And I don't know what his A1C was at that time. We've never really looked at the records,
Yeah.
but yeah. And then he was kind of hallucinating that night, and, it was pretty horrible.
No
And
kidding. I'm sorry. Now, at what point do you start making the connection that because you told me in your note that he had a cousin who was type 1 since a little kid. Did that take a while to put those two things together?
a long while. I never even thought about it
Okay.
until probably maybe even years later.
Hmm.
Or if I did, it wasn't prominent in my mind,
Right.
because I know when they've gotten together, and they get together very seldom, because he lives, she lives one place, we live somewhere else, so we don't really see him that often. But there's been a couple of times, and yeah, they're like sister brother. They're hooked into each other and talking. And I thought, oh, that's good. He has someone else to talk
about
diabetes too. Yeah.
Well, now he's got you. So, but when you're diagnosed at your age, and you're you seem like you're in shape, fit person. Like, do they look at you, and what do they tell you when they realize your blood sugar is that high? What was the call after they finally ran the test?
When they ran the test and saw the C-peptide and everything, she came in to me and she said, and I'm trying to think exactly how it went, but, she said, yep, you're type 1. We're not sure if you're, it could be and then she explained what LADA was, and type 1.5. And I, of course I still don't know that much about it, but I just figure it's type 1. I'm insulin dependent. That's how I explain it. And, they did the test for the C-peptide and the antibodies, about a week later, and I had no antibodies. And she said, I think this is from the immunotherapy. And so when I went to the doctor, the oncologist, I asked him, I said, I now have diabetes. And I think do you think it could possibly be from the immunotherapy? And he said, no way. It's genetic predisposition. I go, okay. I go back to my doctor, and she says, no, we think it's the immunotherapy, but don't argue about it. So that was almost 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I just recently have found a couple of articles connecting the two, because I just, that was another reason why I kind of wanted to be on the program, was because it's so unique. And yet I'm sure there's other people out there that are, around my age that have had immunotherapy or are going to, and maybe they're going to fall into this very small percentage. Maybe it's 0.05. It could be really tiny, of people that could end up with diabetes.
Well, so I wonder if both of those doctors aren't right. Meaning that, if your son has type 1, his cousin has type 1, and your note says that once you were diagnosed, your mother started telling you that your grandmother had type 1 diabetes in the 20s. Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, or maybe type 2,
maybe
because she would
sure.
measure her food. But I don't know how she could have lived that long. She was, my mom was 5 years old, so her grandmother was probably at least close to 50, right?
Okay.
And insulin was only discovered in 1919, the year my mom was born.
Right.
So I think it had to be type 2, which the other crazy thing, since you brought that up, was that I was type borderline. I've been borderline diabetic for at least 15 years. And I always managed it with exercise and diet.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to the doctor and you're getting closer to 6.5, and I'd go home and exercise, or, cut out the junk food that I was eating, and it would always drop down. It was, it'd always go down in that range.
Huh. That is interesting. So you were trending towards type 2, but then you get this immunotherapy, and then boom, type 1, and Your son has type 1, his cousin has type 1. We're not sure about the grandmother. So, I mean, could you have been living your whole life with the markers for type 1 diabetes, and it took this therapy and cancer to kind of throw your immune system out of whack, and kind of your body takes a shot at itself instead of the illness, right? And you get diabetes. Like, that's completely possible. I don't know that you're ever going to really know. I mean, listen, I'm not a scientist, but I don't think there's something that exists that we just give people and they magically get diabetes. I think you have the markers for it, and something kind of pushes you over the edge. But it's fascinating that you made it this long had you not been very sick throughout your entire life?
The one thing that when I go to these health, special naturopath or whatever, mm-hmm. The one thing I had, which they always bring up, is mononucleosis in high school. Yeah. And I have the Epstein-Barr. Okay. So I haven't pursued what that actually means, but I think that is more related to the cancer. But I'm also wondering if it might be related to autoimmune. I don't know.
Does it fill your thoughts? Do you feel like you need to try to figure it out, or do you not think about it too often?
I don't think about it as much as I used to, but I did write to these two research guys this week about, what are the markers if it's genetic, because I don't have the antibodies. Mm-hmm. Well, at least 3 of them I don't have. So I'm not sure about the others, but I have Hashimoto's. Right. I have, from the cancer treatments, I have something called vitiligo. So my skin is all different color, all mm-hmm. different colors. So I'm really concerned about anything to do with my immune system, because it obviously acts in a strange way.
Well, I'm testing my memory here, but so first of all, the one I definitely know for certain is Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease. Type 1's autoimmune. I think vitiligo is too. I'm looking right now.
Yes, it is. It is.
Right. So yep. You just have, so I guess, Nancy, there's 2 ways to think about this. How long have you been fighting with the Hashimoto's? Has that been lifelong, or?
At 50, I figured out that I had it, or my doctor figured out that I had it when I was 50.
Did you
25 years.
Did you struggle prior to that? Were you tired? Struggle with
your weight?
Tired.
Yeah. Just tired. Yeah.
Okay. So do you feel less tired now that you take your, I guess, Synthroid or whatever you're taking?
Probably. Yeah. If I skip it, I can sometimes, a few days later, I might notice, oh, shoot, I've been
taking that medication
and forgetting it. Yeah.
So,
yeah. But I've never had, because I listen to your podcast a lot, and I listened especially to the autoimmune stuff and your doctor and all that stuff. And I don't have any of I've never had, or else I don't notice, the typical symptoms of like a really bad thyroid.
Right.
Even though mine is sponge now. The last time they looked at it with a ultrasound, he said, oh yeah, it's spongy. I don't think it's doing any good for you at all.
Probably not doing anything for you.
Yeah.
Great.
Not doing
great. You should have said, great. My pancreas isn't helping much either. So
yeah, exactly. What else can go wrong?
Yeah. Delightful. But the reason I bring it up is I guess there's different ways to look at this. Like when you're describing this, there's part of me that thinks you made it pretty far without all this stuff happening. It's kind of nice. I know that's a weird way to think of it maybe, but you could have gotten diabetes when you were 20, or you know what I mean? Your thyroid could be really screwing with you or something like that. Like, it's not that I'm saying that your life is less valuable in your 70s. I'm certainly not saying that. But I would, from the outsider's perspective, I would think, well, wow, at least it waited this long. Like, now to you, it doesn't matter. It's your life and it sucks, I imagine.
No, I agree with you.
Do you?
I totally agree with you. The only thing is that as an older I'm 75. I mean, a lot of people don't even live to be 75. And I think about the poor people whose mind isn't as alert as mine used to be before I got overwhelmed with all this stuff. But, if to learn what there is to know about diabetes to manage it in a good manner takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And I was really grateful that, but it seems like my brain is kind of losing it lately, but whatever, but yeah, so I agree with you. I think I went this far, but, to have to learn so much. I mean, look you have over 500 podcasts.
Right.
I mean,
it's a lot. I listen, there can be no doubt, like my mom's 78 and, the things that she can talk about quickly and sharply go away a little by little over the last, the last number of years. Politics still though, she's like rock solid. Her thoughts about politics are like, that's the one thing she's retained, and she can sit and boom, boom, boom. But sometimes you start talking about things and she sort of doesn't see the through lines sometimes right away, or you have to explain something once or twice. And she's like, oh, I see what you're saying, or she'll forget. And I don't know what she would do if she had a serious illness where she had to control a medication like insulin. Mm-hmm. And, the other day I had someone asked my wife, knew about the podcast, what do you do if your vision's not so good? What do you do if your dexterity goes away? Like, how do you use this technology if you can't manage it with your hands? And I would imagine all that stuff is right in the front of your mind now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that I really love about you, but that I see sometimes slips away from me, is common sense. Is just, but I'll tell you, like your mother loves politics. Well, guess what? I love diabetes because it has changed my life. And I kind of mean it in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, but thank God for the COVID, because everybody was home and so was I, and I learned a lot. Okay. So yeah, in some way, it's given me a new, I said this somewhere, it's given me a new focus on my life, one that I never thought I'd have.
Sure.
But also one that it's good. I'm eating so much better than I ever have before in my life. Some of my doctors are seeing a change in, my makeup, and all that is because of diabetes. So, yeah.
So this COVID time gave you the kind of the pause to be able to really think about this whole thing and try to put it into perspective and put ideas into practice.
Right.
Yeah. What did you just say that I wanted to follow up on? Darn. Oh, common sense. Can you give me some examples of how you feel that sometimes it's not there for you when you need it? Speaking of common sense might tell you that when you get type 1 diabetes or you start using insulin, that your doctor would give you the best blood glucose meter that was available. But that's not how that works at all. What happens is the doctor gives you the meter that they know about, or the one that the practice prescribes, or maybe they're in a rut and they've just been prescribing the same meter for so long that they haven't stopped to think that newer, better meters exist. I've thought about that, and I found one for my daughter, and then after that, I was able to talk them into becoming advertisers on the podcast. So I'd like to tell you today about the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. It is a very simple device. It is easy to carry, it has a super bright light, an easy to read screen, and second chance test strips. But most importantly, what the Contour Next One blood glucose meter is, it's accurate. You're over there trying as hard as you can, making decisions with insulin and carbs, and the very least that you could expect while you're making those decisions is an accurate response from your blood glucose meter. The Contour Next One is that meter. It is the most accurate and easy to use meter that I've ever held. And I know in a world where people have glucose monitors now and, using Dexcom and Libre or whatever you got there, you think I don't need a meter. But first of all, yes, you do. And secondly, you're going to use one once in a while, even if you don't use it that often. And again, you should be expecting accurate results. The Contour Next One blood glucose meter is easy to carry, fits in your pocket or the bag that you put your diabetes supplies in, and it has a super bright light for nighttime viewing. The screen's absolutely legible, block letters. I can see it I never once look at it and think, what does that say? Nobody got fancy with the font or anything like that. It's simple to see and interpret. And the test strips, if you get a little blood on but not enough and you go back to get more, those test strips support second chance testing. So no more error codes or the strip just failing. contournext.com/juicebox. This thing's not expensive. It actually could be less in cash than you're paying right now through your insurance company for the meter you have now. Isn't that crazy? You may be paying more now for a substandard meter than you would for the Contour Next One. Just take a few minutes to find out. You deserve it. It's easy to accomplish. contournext.com/juicebox.
What I believe is that common sense is kind of a spiritual quality. It kind of surfaces if we allow it. But I think sometimes when we get anxious or, wound up or have a low like I had last night that won't go away, and you're thinking, what the heck? I only took 3 units. I had 105 carbs. This doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eating and eating and eating. And of course, then, last night I was right. But, when you're 40 and it's still sitting there, but, so you don't have, it's hard to sit there and wait. Common sense says just wait another few minutes and it'll start going up. But yeah.
But you eat. Yeah, because do you live by yourself?
I live by myself. Yes.
Is it a fear?
Yes.
Is it just like, what drives that then?
I mean, the 40 does that, but the 60 doesn't do it so much. But when it's 60 and going down and then 50 and going down. Yeah. And I think I don't think I would pass out, but I'm alone.
Yeah.
I'm alone. I mean, my daughter lives not that far, but right now she's in New York. So she's not
across the street.
Yeah, she's not across the street. And I'll take her off of my Follow app continually because she'll call me and I'm just sitting there eating, so there's no reason for her to call me. So if I can see it going down, sometimes I'll take her off of it. But
Nancy, you're telling me that the exact thing this thing is made for, when you need it the most, you're taking it away so that you won't. All right. So I want to know why. To not bother her, or to not feel like you're being watched? Yes, to not
bother her. Like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, she has to work the next day. And I know that I'm going to come back up. At 40, no. I mean, then I'm okay if someone calls me. But at 65, no. I'm not okay if someone calls me. And I think hers is set at 55. But I rarely get to 55.
Mm-hmm.
But occasionally, like, I don't know what happened last night where I only gave myself 3 units.
So when it happens, let her get woken up. It's fine. She wants to do that. I tell you, it's funny. This has never happened to me before while I'm making this podcast, but I just had a feeling of, like, you just said something that mimics a conversation I have to have with my mother all the time. And it's frustrating. I almost found myself getting frustrated at you when you said it, which is people want to help. You're not taking advantage of them. You're not wasting their time or bothering them. Your daughter wants to do this, and so to take it from her is I think it's kind of sucks because she's worried about you, and now suddenly she can't see it. So it's not like she's going to let it go. She's going to call you anyway. So I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it. Like, not to be a burden. Like, that's the vibe, right? You don't want to be
No.
You just don't want to bother her.
No. This is the thing. If she ever asked me anything about my diabetes, not anything, but, if she ever asks me how I'm doing, or, how's it going, or if she called me, and if she didn't tell me that she didn't like the alarms going off in the middle of the night, it might be a different story. But she's told me, I don't like those alarms going off in the middle of the night.
Oh, I see. She's not as altruistic as I was thinking. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
It was my idea to have her follow me.
Oh. You're like, listen, maybe you could save my life. And she's like, not if it's going to wake me up.
Exactly.
Well, she's gotten everything she needs out of you, I guess, by now, huh? Well, this is a fine how do you do?
She probably got that out of me too, though.
Raise this kid, and now she doesn't want to help save your life at the end? God damn it. Well, that's something. Well, how do you find day-to-day management? I mean, I guess that's not my first question. Let my first question be, how do you find a podcast when you're in your 70s?
I was in the Mastering Diabetes program, and I love that, and that might be another conversation. But there was a girl in there that I was texting back and forth, and we were talking about insulin and trying to get, less rise in our insulin, or in our blood sugar levels. And she recommended I listen to you. Well, your name, your podcast had popped up several times before, but I thought, this is for kids. I don't really want, I'm not a kid. I don't really want to talk about kids anymore. Whatever. Although I have to say, I enjoy your interviews with the kids as one of the best ones that I like. But anyway, so when she sent that to me, I listened to it, and my original thinking was, this is a guy. This is a real guy. He's spontaneous. He's casual. He's goofy sometimes. Anyway, I felt like, when you just kind of sit, you're finally home.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was home.
Oh, that's really lovely. Thank you. You're catching me you're catching me a day after so many people sent me well wishes for my birthday that any nice thing you say to me, Nancy, right now could make me cry. So please be gentle. Okay. That was really nice of you to say. Thank you.
But I want you to know that, and I thought, I think I sent, maybe even after the very first time I heard you, that might have been when I sent the very first email, because I thought, you know what? I bet there's not that many people that are my age that just got diagnosed and are having to deal with it.
Yeah. No, it's not completely uncommon, but it's fairly uncommon. You're a part of a handful of people over 60, I think, that I've spoken to who's been diagnosed with type 1. But you just had a confluence of bad health events at the end. I bet you without the cancer, you might have made it without the diabetes, huh?
Yeah.
You feel like that?
I think so.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide what my question is. So you find the podcast and it all makes sense to you and you start doing it? Like how do you manage right now?
Well, I'm on MDI, but I have a pump. I'm going to get trained on it in a couple of weeks, and that's another chaos. But anyway.
Are you worried about it, or it's just hard to get it set up?
I don't know if it's going to be hard to get set up. Because I haven't been trained on it yet. But I think I'll tell you why. I've wanted a pump for quite some time. Mastering Diabetes really emphasizes MDI because they think you have more control for the way that you eat. When you eat, it's whole food, plant-based, low fat, you get very insulin sensitive. And so anyway, I'm very insulin sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was on Tresiba and trying to get it to keep me stable,
mm-hmm.
but I could tell I called it kick in. I could tell when it kicks in because then I would drop, and I could tell when it's wearing off because then I was rising. So I kept thinking I would like to get a pump, but then it kind of freaked me out because I know it's going to be probably 2 weeks at least of not knowing if things are working or not. And while I'm saying this, there's one thing you said that really stuck out to me in one of the early podcasts that I listened to, and I think this applies to a lot of things that I do. But it said with insulin, what you said was something to the effect that if things aren't working the way you think they should, then there's something else going on.
Yeah, I understand. So the way I feel about it is that once you have your settings right, you know what you're doing. If something randomly, the way I think of it is if the insulin doesn't do what I expect it to do, I don't think that there's like a magic fairy that's come in and messed up my diabetes like situation with my daughter. I think something's wrong. Like this,
something's wrong.
Yeah, this didn't do what it was supposed to do. I miscounted carbs. I didn't take into account fat and protein the way I should have. This site's old. Like that's the stuff you start like I roll through in my head very quickly. And it's most of the time, I have to say for me, most of the time it's just not covering the food correctly. When something goes wrong.
I flew to Miami, and when I got there, the insulin wasn't working. It didn't seem like it was working. And and my doctor had told me, Nancy, if it doesn't seem like it's working, just give yourself more. So I had those two things. You said that if it doesn't seem like it's working, it's probably not you, it's probably something else, and she said, just use more. So I kept using more and more and more. And finally, stupid that I was, I primed my pen and there was nothing came out.
So you were just shooting air.
Yeah, I was shooting air in myself. Right. And I was like, oh, so I think I primed it about, 6 or 7 times. And finally I did 8 units and finally I got a trickle. So then after that, I was fine.
So incredibly strange you brought that up because tomorrow there's a variables episode going up with Jenny and I about travel. And she brings that up about how to prime things when you're going on off airplanes. Yeah. That's so crazy.
Well, and then that kind of opened my mind up to, a pump. I know that's going to happen with me. There's going to be air in there and I'm going to think I'm getting insulin. So I'm preparing myself for all the things that could go wrong.
I guess it depends on which pump you end up with too. Because if you have tubing, then that's more of an issue. Omnipod, you won't see that problem with the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
When I first listened to you, I tried to get Omnipod, but Medicare wouldn't cover it the way that they cover the T-Slim.
Really?
With my insurance, because I don't have a really good prescription plan. And at the time, which was about a year and a half ago or so. At the time, they were a prescription, you got it in your pharmacy, whereas the T-Slim is DME,
durable medical
medical equipment, and the insulin is included. So, and that goes through the DME. So I'm on Medicare Part B.
You'll just have to remember to prime your tubing when you get on and off a plane and do the things. Jenny describes it all really well in that it's like a really short episode, but she does such a good job with it.
Yeah. I'll listen to it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled that you love the show. It's it tickles me that the show reaches people in all kind of scales of spots in life. And I also enjoyed when you said that you thought originally it was for children. And I've always maintained that the podcast is for anybody who uses insulin. It doesn't matter how old you are. Was it the name that made it feel young, or was it that I was the father of a child with diabetes? What part threw you off?
I didn't even know who you were. I should, because I said before that I knew who you were, but I didn't. What I knew was that I'd seen Juicebox come up, on the little, I don't know what it looks like but it looks like a little cartoon kind of thing, or kid.
It used to be a picture of my daughter when she was young on the thing, and now it's just a logo. So it looked like, so there was a kid. So you thought kid.
Whatever it was.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I just thought, and it was Juicebox, and I thought, I've never had a Juicebox. So, that I didn't fit in that category.
But now, Nancy, I'm amazing. and you should have started listening right away when you saw it. Is that right?
I know. I agree 100%. Yeah. No. And I mean, if I could make you cry, I hope I do, because I think that the other thing that I see in you is that you just, the best episodes are when you're just you. You know, you have you're really interested in people. You're really not critical at all. You're not judgmental. You really want to help. You're very supportive. You know, I get it if you get pissed a little bit and you try to contain it, you know, but I think a lot of people can identify with that. And I think that's just something that you have tapped into. You know, you figured it out. And a lot of people don't ever figure that out.
I very desperately, for reasons that I don't completely understand, want people to be okay.
Yes.
I feel very responsible for things that I'm not responsible for sometimes. You know, so you make this thing and you put it out into the world and it finds somebody and then it proves out. And then somehow that makes it feel like my responsibility to find more people. And I know it's not. And I'm not tortured by it. I'm just driven by it. So, you know, I think you are such a great example at your age to find a thing that really, I mean, it's a podcast. It shouldn't be for you. You know what I mean? Like common sense would tell you, like, I'm probably not talking to a lot of people in their 70s, but then here it is and it works. And it works for you too. And that makes me happy, and it's fulfilling. And then I can enjoy that for a split second before it makes me feel like, well, then aren't there more people I should be finding with the podcast?
Wow. You know, when I recommend your podcast, the phrase I use the most is he'll help, you know, if you listen, you'll learn how to use insulin.
Okay.
You know, so, and a lot of times there'll be a certain, like there was a researcher that you had on that with some kind of treatment for diabetes. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I should contact him to find out if he knows about this genetic predisposition or whatever. But, you know, certain podcasts will just ring a bell for someone. You know, sometimes it's my sister who doesn't have diabetes, but that I think that she might be interested. I think you interviewed a nurse one time and how she was shocked that what she knew about diabetes wasn't enough to help, you know, for her to.
Jen, was it Utah Jen?
Job.
Was that?
I remember Utah Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was she a nurse? I didn't.
She was. Yeah. I put up an episode today, I have to tell you, is probably the proudest I've been of the podcast in a while. It's with an endocrinologist who, if you really stop and listen to her whole conversation, the podcast changed the way she helps people. And as she's describing becoming educated and being enthusiastic and then kind of settling into the way things work. And I forget the exact phrase. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but maybe not doing as well for her patients as she could have. And then finding the podcast and being revitalized by it. That's the most proud I've felt in a while when I was talking to somebody.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you know, one of the things that I look at sometimes is I'm 75. Can I start another career at this age? I mean, I did at 57, but can I do it at 75? Because what I've learned about diabetes and even the way that I eat has been so helpful that I would love to be able, and I'm a social worker, you know, so I like to help people.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, this is such a helpful thing for people to understand, because I think once they really understand that they have more control over their life than they think they do, they don't have to just give into it like a deep well, you know, just keep going deeper and deeper. For some people, you know, and I know all people aren't like that, but for some people it would make a huge difference. And I'm sure it does make a huge difference.
Yeah. It's, I think it's lovely. And I've known a lot of people over the years who have tried to help other people, and it's always valuable and always selfless, hopefully. And they do a great job in their own way. It's when it scales up that it becomes strange. Like when you start really reaching people, and it's a lot of people, you become very aware of the other stuff that you don't think exists. Like you have an interpretation of me, and so does everyone else who's listening. And it's based on things that you probably think I'm doing on purpose. And many times I'm not doing anything on purpose. There are times when I talked to a guy about, he's an automotive engineer, and if you listen to it, you could be confused to thinking that we talked about cars for a while, but I was talking about diabetes in my head. Like I was talking about staying abreast of new technology, keeping up, not falling behind. And to me, I mean, did I do it on purpose? I did a little, you know what I mean? Like, but it wasn't some Machiavellian thing where I thought I'll have this guy on. It's the way the conversation went. And we got towards the end of it, and he said something like, well, to bring it back to diabetes. And I laughed, and I was like, no, this whole thing's been about diabetes. I've been talking about diabetes the whole time. And he's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, so there's little stuff like that. You know, once you realize you're talking to a large group of people and that nobody's going to feel the same way. Like there are things about me that you like that other people hate, and probably vice versa. You know, can I say something about that? There are things about you that I don't like, but because the core of you, I know what you're about. I know you're about helping people to manage their insulin. Yeah.
I love that. Because that's what you know that you're about that.
I have to say, Nancy, I think that when you're broadcasting to a lot of people, there's two decisions to make. You can either be yourself and know for certain that there are going to be some things about yourself that are going to rub people wrong, or you can sanitize yourself. And in my opinion, then just sound like you've, I don't know the best way to put it, but it's not real anymore. If you know I'm holding something back, then how could you possibly believe anything that I'm saying? If I started talking in a big fake voice and it all, you know, like that all was happening constantly. Even when I make the beginning of the podcast, like when I'm like, welcome to the Juicebox, I'm kind of messing around, you know, like by doing a stupid voice in my head, it's a stupid voice for a couple of seconds. If I had my way, the podcast would just start with people talking. Like it wouldn't even, you know, but I have to brand it. I have to say, this is the episode. I got to tell you who the sponsors are. But if it was up to me, if I didn't have to have sponsors, you and I would have started talking. I would have hit record, and that'd be the first thing you'd hear when you turned the episode on. I really don't want to shine things up too much, because I know people who put out content like that. And frankly, I don't know how anyone listens to it. So, you know, so rather me curse once and that make you uncomfortable, or I tell a sex joke or something and that makes you uncomfortable or something like that. But it's better than me swallowing my thought and you hearing through your headphones, he was going to say something and he didn't say it, because then I think it sounds disingenuous. So I don't know. Yeah, you have to hate me a little. Like you're a couple of generations ahead of me. I must do a number of things you don't like.
And that's not why.
No. Why? Tell me why. One of the things you really don't like about me. I'm going to start asking people what they don't like about me. It'll be more fun. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh.
Can you think of something?
Nothing pops in my head.
See, you just don't want to say you love me, but you do.
I want to say whatever it is, because I agree with you that I think if we're as honest as we can be, then we're more listenable.
I received a letter one time from a woman who she went on to tell me everything about me that she didn't like. And it felt a little disconnected. Like at some point, maybe she was yelling at somebody that wasn't me. But she said a couple of things in the letter. I was like, I think she's right about this. So, but I wouldn't just stop it. I just took it into account, and I thought, okay, she might be right about this. Let me make sure. And now I have a way, like, for instance, she's like, you talk too much. And there's part of me that's like, well, it's a podcast. Like if I don't talk, you know, like she's like, well, let the guests talk. And I'm like, well, some guests are chattier than others. You know, like, do you want to be interested, or do you want to sit and listen for someone to come up with a thought? Like I have to make a decision. But what I do now is when I make the transcripts, the service I use tells me what percentage of time I spoke versus what percentage of time the guest speaks. And I do let my eyes run over that number at the end when I'm done every time. And if I see it get farther than a 60-40 split, I start to like I pay attention to that in my head. But most of the time, I do not speak more than 10% more than the other person. So,
you know what, I what's my thought on that? I was going to say something about that. Oh yeah. One of the things that I think is that we don't know which people are chatty and which people aren't, because you're the one that's having to interview them.
right.
You know, you're the one that's having to talk to them. So you're the one that's kind of sit there, oh, do I have to now? Are they going to say something if I wait a little bit longer? Or, you know, so you're the one that has to make that decision. Whereas all we have to do is just sit and listen to you.
I guarantee you that I can think of 3 episodes right now that if I did not spice up and get talking, you would have considered jumping out of a window while you were listening to it. You're like, I can't take this. But they were still good interviews. Those people just didn't have as much to offer in volume. They still had good content. It just they weren't voluminous with their content. But I'll tell you another thing that the podcast taught me was just to slow down. I mean, I think if you go back, I'm speaking more quickly in older episodes. I had a real desire to not let there be any pauses. I wanted it to be, you know, I didn't want you to lose interest. So I think that's helping me too. And I genuinely believe if I'm doing this 2 years from now, I should be better at it 2 years from now than I am now. And I think I'm doing pretty well now. So we'll see.
I think you're doing well. You know, you're doing well. But I think that sometimes, not often, I haven't seen this very often, but there are sometimes you get someone on there that talks so fast. It's probably nerves, but they talk so fast that it's kind of hard to keep up sometimes.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of curl over their tongue, you know, roll over there. It's probably nerves, and that probably just happens in the beginning. But because I've heard you say many times that you talk fast, or the East Coast talks fast, and you know, I'm California, so you know, I don't talk fast, I guess.
Well, there are some people that your pauses are so long. Some of you, I can hear my brain is yelling at me. It's like, oh my God, say something. I've taken pauses. I did it once for this one guy. I loved his content, but he spoke so slowly. So I spent like an extra hour, and I took the gaps out of his pauses. And that's not easy to do trust me, it's not easy. So like, I just was like, I like what he's saying. I want people to hear it, but man, if he pauses like that again, I'm going to like lose my mind, you know? So, and I try to think of what it's like for you guys to listen. I also am a fan of audio, and I know what I like to listen to. And if this podcast gets too far away from something I would listen to, then I wouldn't even know how to give it to you. I wouldn't feel comfortable putting it out. So,
I think that the format of it is cool, because whatever you're talking about, it seems like there's always, and I used to say this, I probably would still say it, there's always at least one takeaway. Oh, pre-bolus a little bit sooner, or, you know, whatever it might be. There's always some little takeaway that makes it worth listening to. And it becomes, I think and you say this too, it kind of grows in you. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I wonder how did I learn all this? How did I get to where I am? You know,
same way my kids yell about their math teacher at the beginning of the year. This lady doesn't know what she's talking about. She sucks. And at the end of the year, they have good grades and they understand the math. I don't know how it happens, but it does. I'll tell you that part of that for me, I won't say the name of it, obviously, but there's a website that has rock solid information about type 1 diabetes. And I don't read it all, if I'm being honest, but I don't read it, but I know it exists, and I've seen it enough times, and I know the person who runs the site. And if you back in the day would have said, whose stuff is more popular, Scott's or this site, you would have just assumed that site. It's very professionally done. It's well supported with money. Like, it's done really well. But that person came to me and said, how do you get so many people to read your blog? And I thought, wait, they don't read yours? And then we dug into it, and wow, nobody reads that site. And I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. It's full of really great information. So then I started paying attention to the site for a little while, and they were putting out great stuff. But nobody cares. Nobody's going to read your boring descriptions of whatever. It's not, people have a finite amount of time to live, and even if it's to their benefit, they're going to have a hard time absorbing stuff that's so dry and it's boring, So if somebody gets to listen to you and I talk for an hour and they take something from it, that's terrific. But if you and I had 5 points to make and I went through them like a school marm and you answered like you were reading from bullet points, I guarantee you no one's listening to this podcast. And so I'm not going to do that. Like, off the top of my head, you're diagnosed in your 70s. That's weird. You had cancer first, right? Weird. Right. You had cancer. That's amazing. You're doing well. You learned about your family members who have cancer. You have parents who are older. You found a podcast that helped you. You've looked around. You're worried about yourself and looking into it, but you're not overwhelming yourself with what ifs and whys. You talked about not looking backwards, even though you don't think you said that. You talked about staying forward, moving forward, and you're going to make someone comfortable. Somebody's going to have gotten this. Also, you said something that I'm always thinking and never say. The episodes with little kids are good and they're worth listening to, except, those are the ones that don't get listened to as much. But I still put them out because I know they're important. And I think people are going to figure out that they're important to listen to an 11-year-old's opinion of what it's like to have diabetes, and not you just infer what you think it's like for him to have diabetes onto him.
What shocks me about those interviews is the age of the kids and how kind of mature they are, the understanding that they have about things. And I'm like, there's no way I was like that at that age.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd had diabetes early, if it would have made a difference, because I've heard from some of them. And I think you've even asked that question sometimes. Do you think that diabetes has, changed the way that you look at things? And I don't know if they're even old enough to understand that it does, but
no one knows what impacts them. But that's why you ask the questions, to hear them think about it. Like, they're not going to, anybody who thinks that you can just say today's episode is going to be about X, Y, and Z, and that's going to be interesting is wrong. Anyone who thinks that when you ask someone a question, they know the answer, you're wrong. I've asked a lot of people a lot of questions, and the people who know the answer in a split second suck. It's boring and it's pre-rehearsed. They've answered the question 1,000 times. I get nothing out of hearing from that person. It's not valuable. That's just
it's not real.
No, it's somebody reading their life out loud, and they, for some reason, are in a position where they have to say that a lot. I want to hear you just dig into your brain for a second, or to come out of nowhere and say, you know what, I'm losing sometimes common sense. Like, that's not a thing people would admit to, and you have to have a conversation like this if you want to get to those things. And for people who understand that, they'll listen to these episodes. And for people who don't understand that, this isn't going to be for them. So that's cool, but I can't make something that's for everybody. I got to make what I think is interesting and what I think is valuable.
But I mean, I think the amount of people that you have following you and the amount of people that listen to the podcast and the amount of downloads to me, is an interesting reflection of how many people are really real or identify with realness or even common sense, like you said, how many people, because that isn't as, I don't know if it's not as common, but I was a counselor, so I talked to a lot of different people, and it's shocking that you can trust your common sense. That's shocking, but you talk about it all the time, and I think it's life,
Yeah. You just have to trust your gut and see what's happening. And listen, some of those people who try to put out content that's inauthentic, I mean, I don't know if they're inauthentic, but they might not know who they are enough to be authentic. And I've interviewed people before who don't know themselves. It's clear when you're talking to them. They don't know how they feel. They don't know why they do things. And sometimes that's even interesting, to listen to somebody not understand. I'm probably forever going to use this as an example, but there's a young girl that came on to talk about psychedelic drugs, and she wanted to tell people about how to use drugs safely. And I was like, okay, come on and talk about that. And I mean, we talked for a while, we were maybe most of the way through the episode. And I had the feeling like she mostly probably smoked pot and took mushrooms once in a while, like recreationally. And I said, so you don't really do any really hard drugs? And she goes, no. And there's a pause and she goes, well, cocaine. And I was like, what? But I didn't say what in the moment. In the moment, I just said, okay, this is how she feels. Let her say how she feels. And, but in my mind, I was like, she doesn't think of cocaine as a hard drug. Well, that's interesting. And maybe, and then I started thinking like, is it? I mean, I've never done it, but is it not? Is it? Does she not know? It just brings up all these these interesting questions that should make your brain think. Like, I think when you're done listening to the podcast, you should still be having a conversation with yourself when it's over, or I didn't do a very good job. That's all. I'm not supposed to make everything right or answer everybody's questions or scold some girl for saying cocaine's not a hard drug. You know what I mean? Like, that's not my job. My job is to let her talk about it and let you hear it and see. How did this turn into therapy for me, Nancy? What's going on?
I don't know, but let me say something on that, because you brought up something that really I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Kind of on that about, how our thinking kind of creates our reality and, what really is reality and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, one of the things that I've been wondering about because of my age is, am I sick? Am I considered sick? I mean, when I first got diabetes, I kept hearing, you can do whatever you want to do. You don't have to change your life, everything. Well, I tried that, and I would have lows in the middle of a counseling session, and I would have to eat, or I'd have a high and have to inject insulin. And I thought, what does this mean? You can't, you can do everything that you could do before, So I saw it like very
black and white,
very like, okay. Yeah, very black and white, that everything I was doing before, the way I was eating, I could continue eating, I could have snacks, I could have I couldn't do any of that stuff if I wanted to have a good blood sugar,
So I think
that,
go
ahead.
I was going to say, when they say that, I think that's them saying, you don't have to go home and pull the car into the garage and close the door and let it run. Like, don't worry, your life's going to be okay. You can do all the things. They don't say the rest of it. It's always the rest of the sentence they live out. Hey, you can do everything that you used to do with diabetes, except you better make sure your basal insulin's right, and don't go bolusing a big meal before you go for a run. And they never say the rest. They say the upbeat part. They say the easy part. They don't say the stuff you need to know. And that's the fascinating thing.
And that, that was the shock. That was the shock because I had seen my son, but I never really got involved with his insulin or anything like that. So I saw my son, and he just looked like he was doing the same thing he'd always done. Mm-hmm. But once we started talking, when I was diagnosed, I have a CGM, he doesn't. Mm-hmm. He, one time we went and another thing I want to tell you that you said, but I looked at my blood sugar and it was like 150 or something. And he went, I said, what's yours, Jeremy? He runs and takes his blood sugar. He goes, oh my gosh, I need insulin. It's 320. I was like, gosh. Oh my gosh. So when I'm around him, he sees the benefit of having a CGM, mm-hmm. but I don't think he was even aware of it before I told him.
Do you think he'll get one?
I think he will.
Good.
I think he will. There was one other thing I wanted to say about what we were talking about, how life, I don't remember. I don't want to make it up. Anyway.
Well, what I was going to say is, start talking about a t-shirt slogan you saw at one point. Well, this is the point where I ask you if we've talked about everything that you want to talk about. So, have we?
I think so. I can't think of anything that I told you how great you are and how much I love the podcast. Right, that's important. And talked about the common sense that you express, and how I've shared that, if you want to learn how to use insulin, listen to this podcast. And I mean, those things were important to me so that, oh, your picture is great. This is,
Oh, the photo that you're seeing on the Zoom, that's from me. That's me posing in front of Mount Rainier, except you can't see Mount Rainier anymore just because I was happy with how I looked in the photo. I don't often take photos of myself where I'm like, I don't look hideous. So I was like, I'm keeping that one.
That's a good, I feel like I'm really, I can get into you. Like I'm talking to you. I mean, I know I turned my video off for a minute and but no, we could probably talk all day if we wanted to, but I think everything that
I'm glad. So, and I think you're right. I am, I agree. We could keep talking. I'm going to go to Home Depot with Arden now and pick out a new ceiling fan for her bedroom because hers stopped working. And she very adamantly told me it needed to be replaced quickly. So I was like, okay, we will. Arden's body doesn't regulate temperature as well as any of us would like. So she needs to have a couple of implements around her to help her out.
Unfortunately, sometimes thyroid does that.
Yeah, that's definitely part of that. And her medication's really dialed in. So I just think it's going to be her cross to bear. But actually she's, I just ordered today. I can tell you this because this won't go up forever. I just ordered a microphone stand today. I have her microphone. I've got the stand now, and she's on my schedule twice in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to record a bunch together, and I'm basically going to interview her, and then we're going to kind of move into the stuff I want her to know when she goes to college, and have those conversations. So I've been trying for years to get her to do this, and I think I have finally got her. I know she doesn't want to do it, but I don't know why. I don't know if she'll know why exactly. But she needs hours, community service hours for school. And she asked her guidance counselor, if I did this, would this count as community service hours? So she's going to get hours for the time she's being interviewed. I'm going to show her how to edit the show. And so she's going to get a bunch of different stuff.
Wow.
But anyway, so that's hopefully it'll be of some service to people when they hear it. But yeah, I'm sure,
because you talk about her all the time and what you've learned. There's one other thing I wanted to say.
Okay.
One time you said something to the effect, I don't know, you were talking about something and interviewing someone, and maybe you were talking about, well, when Arden was first diagnosed and I was frustrated, didn't know what was going on, and took probably 3 or 4 years, and, gradually things started, I think it was your 500th series, it started knowing more and everything. And, when I hear that, because I've only been diagnosed for a year and a half, and or almost 2 years, but I'll tell you, when I was first diagnosed, I read so much, I learned so much. I thought, and when I heard the first time you say that, I thought, but I know a lot. I really know a lot, and then I thought, how much more can I know? I mean, I'm putting 24/7 into this diabetes, and how to eat and how to manage insulin, and, what kind of insulin and all that kind of stuff. And when I hear you say that, it could, wait till you've been a diabetic for 3 years. And I go, what?
Right.
But it's very comforting, because now I'm going to get a pump. So I know it's going to change, but it's very comforting to know that there's always more, over 500 podcasts,
Yeah. No, I definitely thought there'd be an end to it when I first started doing it, but I was just taking advice from someone that it didn't end up being great advice. They said that you'll run out of stuff to talk about. And I should have known when they said it. Like, I can't imagine me running out of things to talk about, but I meant important things. I just think it's going to keep growing. I think, algorithms are going to come, and I mean, look at you. You're going to probably be using an algorithm soon, and that's really exciting. And I think if we really think of you specifically, you have this kind of like amount of time here and don't get me wrong, you're very you do not come off like you're 73 when I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you, but you have an amount of time to get really good at that. And then, because there might be a day where you're a little slower and this thing's still going to work the same for you. And that'll be amazing. There won't be as many opportunities for things to go wrong. And I think that'll be a big deal for you in your life, just the way it is in anyone's, honestly. So, and we're going to need to talk about that stuff.
Yeah. And fortunately, I have a son that's diabetic, so he understands. So I'm not living with my daughter. I might be living with my son.
Yeah. Well, I hope he ends up with some upgraded technology. I think that would be really great for him. And I want to thank you so much for doing this and taking the time out of your day to do this. It was really fun, and I know you were excited to do it. I could tell by your notes. So I appreciate that very much.
Okay. Well, great talking with you.
Yeah, you too. Hold on one second. Okay. Go what?
Go get the fan.
Go get the fan. Yeah, getting the fan's not the problem. It's that I got to put it up, and I don't know the last time I did that, so now I got to remember how to put up a ceiling fan. But no, I thank you. Hold on one second. A huge thanks to Nancy for coming on the show today and telling us all her story. And I'd like to thank the Contour Next One blood glucose meter for being a longtime sponsor of the Juicebox Podcast. Find out more and get started today at contournext.com/juicebox. It's actually a really good website. I mean, as far as websites for medical stuff goes, it's very complete and informative. I mean that sincerely. I'm a fan of well-done websites. contournext.com/juicebox. Yeah, I even said it again. Don't forget to head over to the T1D Exchange, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Take the survey. Help out people with diabetes and the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.